Creation today are words from Paul's letter to the Romans, chapter 8. I read again the first half of the text that we had earlier, verses 18 through 21. For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is going to be revealed to us. For the creation eagerly waits with anticipation for God's sons to be revealed. For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it, in the hope that the creation itself will also be set free from the bondage to decay into the glorious freedom of God's children. This is God's word. Brothers and sisters in Christ, as human beings, we are drawn to hyperbole, overstatement, exaggeration. We have an attraction for things being described in the superlative, the best, the finest, or the worst, the deadliest. I can't tell you how many times during the last month or so, a couple of months even, I have heard the coming election in November described as the most important election of our lifetime. Now, maybe that's true. I don't know. I would not want to say that it's unimportant. But I can also tell you that since I was first old enough to vote in 1983, every election through which I have lived literally has been described as the most important election of our lifetime. Were they all? Really? A term that I hear used on the news more and more is the word unprecedented. In the times in which we've been living, I've heard it used to refer to weather and climate in which we're living, to, of course, the pandemic in which we are all suffering, to the racial injustice and the riots that have been going on, to just about every other strange thing about these times in which we are currently living. And don't get me wrong, we're living under some extreme conditions. But I think that a look back through history might tend to soften our description of these events somewhat if we get that bigger perspective. In our personal lives, perhaps we don't use such extreme or strong language to describe the things through which we have to suffer on an individual basis. And yet in our hearts, I believe we often get to that point in life where we feel that we have taken as much as we can, that we are living on the very edge of what we are able to tolerate. I don't know if you saw the news on Friday, but apparently the state of Oklahoma leads the nation in suffering from despair. Contributing to the problem are the rates among us of depression and suicide and poverty and hours worked. Now, maybe you've had to struggle with some of these things yourself. Maybe you have not. But all of us contend with something that gets in the way of our personal goals, that stands between us and the little utopia that we are trying to create for ourselves as we muddle along through life. Being a Christian is no escape route to earthly bliss, no matter how much the prosperity preachers want to convince us otherwise. It can help us not to make matters worse in many things for a while, but just being a Christian does not insulate you or me from bad weather, a bad economy, bad genetics, bad leadership, or many of the other things that are beyond our personal control. You know the temptation then. If Christianity cannot prevent the worst, if it cannot promise us the best here and now, then people start to wonder, well, then why bother? What's the point? Is it even relevant anymore? Should we be messing around with this Christian faith? Should we bother with religion at all? Maybe the time has come for us to take matters into our own hands and to get busy about the work of fixing the problems and finding the solutions that I want to make my life the way I want it right now. That might be a short-term solution, the kind of thing that people do who have little or no patience for dealing with what God dishes out in life, that have this desire for instant gratification that they simply can't put off. But this faith looks beyond the misery of this present moment. It understands everything that we go through in light of the greater glory that God has promised to you and me. And that's the Apostle Paul's point in these words of Romans 8 this morning. The Apostle Paul, in these words, helps us to find a realistic reckoning of our present suffering. We find this realistic reckoning of our present suffering in view of our future glory and in view of all creation's future hope. Paul would be the last person to deny that we as Christians do actually suffer in this world. In fact, from the very first days in which he became a Christian, in which he followed Jesus, Jesus had this to say about Paul in what his life of following was going to mean for him. I will show him how much he must suffer for my name. For the next 30 years, people chased him, beat him, lied about him, and even threw him in jail in order to try to shut him up. In addition to that, Paul knew what it was to be in danger of his life from life-threatening weather events. He had physical ailments that he had to work through and carry along with him. He sometimes had trouble getting along with the members of his own missionary team. At no point in his ministry did he become the Apostle Pollyanna. Paul understood what it was to suffer. He had a realistic view of it. But the man did not despair. He found a realistic reckoning of our present sufferings in view of the future glory that God has promised to us. For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is going to be revealed to us. For the creation eagerly awaits for God's sons to be revealed. You don't pick it up right away in the English, but some of the terminology Paul uses here in describing our present sufferings and future glory comes from the world of trade and finance. When he says, I consider, the Greek behind it actually is an accounting term. You may remember the King James here where he says, or it translates, I reckon. And the picture before us is a ledger sheet with two columns. On the one side, you have everything that goes along with our earthly sufferings. On the other side, you have everything that goes along with our future and eternal glory. And then the question is, when you get to the bottom of the sheet and you look at the totals, how do they add up? Do the math. When he says that it's not worth comparing, there is a picture there too. There is a picture of scales. And in this case, the things from those two sides of the ledger sheet are thrown into the tray on either side. On one side of the scale, on the tray, you find the eternal glory, and on the other side of the scale, you find the present earthly sufferings. Well, how does the scale look? How does it all balance? Paul wants you to know that it is not worth comparing. It's not as though these things are sort of close and the scale is coming up on one side or the other. No, on the side of eternal glory, the scale has dropped to the bottom. I mean, we have eternal things there. And when you put the present sufferings into the other side, it doesn't budge the scale. It doesn't bring it up even a fraction. Our present sufferings are just a moment in time, temporary, and against the eternity of what God has prepared. They hardly even register. We need to see it this way if we're going to get a realistic reckoning of the sufferings that we have now when we consider the future glory that God has prepared. On the side of glory, this is what you are going to get into all eternity. Paul says that we are waiting for God's sons to be revealed. Now, it is true that we are waiting for this, even though we have already been adopted as his sons. We are waiting for that to be revealed. You see, you might expect that if we've been adopted into God's family, that we would enjoy the privileges of that adoption right away. If you were a member, a son or daughter of a royal family, well, then you might expect that you get royal privileges to go along with that. You might think that your life is going to be a bit better than the poor commoners. If you are a member of God's family, well, then you might think that your life would have some of these divine benefits, that it might look a little bit more like paradise, even now. My brother and sister-in-law in Florida a few years ago adopted a little boy who was born to a drug addict. The boy's life now is the life of a child in an upper middle class family. My brother-in-law makes a 6-figure income. It is no longer, in his new adoptive home, the life of squalor and poverty that one might expect where you have drug addiction someplace in a ghetto. And so we have already been adopted as God's children. And you need to know that at the cross, God has already signed the adoption papers in his own blood. The sin that made us the devil's own has been completely washed away. And in your call to faith, God has made you someone for whom that adoption has been completely finalized. We have the right to call God our own Father, to consider ourselves his own sons and daughters even now. But it may seem as though life is a long trip from the old home in which we live to the new home, from the old family of which we were a part to the new family. And perhaps now it seems that way. But understand that it is that new home and that new family to which your life, no matter what you suffer, is inevitably leading. And in our new home in glory, God's family, that we are a part of it will be clear for all to see, especially also for ourselves. We won't be stuck in some ratty housing in a drug-infested ghetto. All that we're fed and that we wear and how we are housed will take place in God's own palace. It's a realistic reckoning, a realistic way of looking at our current sufferings, our present sufferings, when we consider the glory that God has prepared for us in the future. Paul goes on to describe that glory like this: the creation itself will also be set free from the bondage to decay into the glorious freedom of God's children. Now, we're going to talk more in a moment about what that freedom is going to mean for creation, since he says that the creation is also going to get set free. But let's realize first that the freedom is applied to God's children, that's you and me, that there is a glorious freedom into which you and I are going to enter. If you try not to sin now, can you do it? Maybe for some sins it seems easy. I mean, in some ways we have things that aren't naturally so tempting to us. Maybe you are gifted with the kind of personality that is relatively calm and mild-mannered, and so you don't feel so tempted towards rage or anger or hatred or loss of temper, because it just kind of goes with who you are and how you've been made. But maybe you like the nicer things in life, and it is harder to say no to yourself when you're shopping, even to the extreme. Maybe you find it hard to trust God when He promises that He's going to take care of your every earthly need. And so, it's hard to resist worry about how you are going to pay for your life. Maybe there's some other vice or weakness that's a bigger trap for you as you live your life. Already now, you and I are free from the guilt of these sins. The guilt cannot be held against us. You will not be condemned. But in the freedom to come, God says that we will be free from the hold and the control that they have on our lives. It's not just that we will be able by some force of strength to resist them, but He will bring us to that place where they have no pull upon us at all, where it doesn't even occur to us that that might be something I want to do. And then greater yet is the freedom that we have from all the consequences of our sin, from the decay that Paul talks about, the destruction that sin brings along with it in life. Glory will mean that we will be no longer slaves to this long, drawn-out process by which our bodies have one system shut down after another until they finally fail. Early on, it may seem like little things that are going along. The hair doesn't have so much color in it any longer. The skin gets dry and crinkly. Heartburn and reading glasses become just a normal part of life. But then we face more serious concerns. Heart disease perhaps becomes an issue. Cancer shows up in some part of the body. Our minds slip as we slide and regress into second childhood. And then finally the body itself succumbs to death. From this present suffering, Paul promises we will be free. Not free because we get a pill, we have a surgery, not free until the next major health crisis comes along, but truly liberated from the effects of decay and death that sin has brought upon our bodies, free to live in an undisturbed and an undimmed wholeness and wellness for ages that never end. This is our future glory, and it gives us a realistic reckoning of our present sufferings when we consider the future glory that God has prepared for those He's adopted as His own. It helps us to understand that these present sufferings are really temporary irritations. Understand, too, that we won't be perfect people living in an imperfect world, something like the experience that Jesus had when He came and spent some time on our planet. But that God, rather, is going to provide us a future perfection, as creation itself has a future hope that has to be thrown into the balance with our present sufferings. For the creation eagerly awaits with anticipation for God's sons to be revealed. For creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of Him who subjected it, in the hope that the creation itself will be set free from the bondage to decay into the glorious freedom of God's children. We live in a broken world, and the truth is we're the ones who broke it. We make it worse by polluting it, by misusing its resources by driving some of our fellow creatures to extinction by the other ways in which we have abused the planet God gave us on which to live. But the truth is, it was broken before we actually did any of these things, and it was broken by us. God had to change the way in which the current world order worked as a consequence of our sin. He subjected the world to futility. He had to disrupt that created order that had been in the beginning so that we would not continue to consider this our permanent home in a kind of paradise. And in this way, it would present an obstacle to our return to God. The climate was not supposed to produce deadly disasters like the hurricane that plowed through Louisiana this past week, or the wildfires that are burning out of control in Northern California. It was not the original plan that the insects would spread deadly disease among us, or that the larger animals would fear and even attack us. Mount Vesuvius never should have created a fascinating tomb for the people who live in Pompeii. All of this is futility. All of this is the creation working against the purpose for which God had given it in the first place, which was to serve you and me. God had to turn his earthly paradise into a kind of a present painful purgatory in the new reality that was caused by our sin. That is not the world in which you are going to spend eternity. The creation itself will also be set free from the bondage to decay into the glorious freedom of God's children. Our Lord is going to remake this universe before he asks us to spend forever in it. It will be free from everything that is currently related to its decay. There are many questions we might have about what that new world, that new universe, that new heavens and new earth are going to be like. In general, we might say that it will serve us at every turn and in every way without end. We're left with many questions about what this is going to mean specifically. I don't know what our diet is going to be like in the world to come. I do know that we will not need to waste a single moment worrying about whether it's going to add weight or raise our cholesterol. I don't know whether God might have in this idea of a new creation which has been set free from its former decay, including the idea that some of the animals or even plants might see the resurrection. I do know that this passage of Paul leaves open the possibility that some of your dear pets will see you in the life to come. I do not know any of the specifics about the landscape or the climate in the life that lies ahead of us. But I do know that it includes no scorching heat, no icy cold, no barren wastelands, no lifeless deserts. Life, love, freedom. These are the operative words in the new heavens and new earth that God has prepared for you and for me. Hyperbole, overstatement, exaggeration. Those things aren't even going to be possible. Superlatives, best. That is going to describe everything about our experience without end, all we know. So set that eternity against our present suffering. Do the math. And prepare for glory. Amen. Please stand.